My name is Rowena Larkins. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent the last 2 years living in my late father's house on the edge of Charleston. People think I'm quiet because I have nothing to say, but silence is how I keep from breaking things that can't be fixed. Tonight, that silence cracked. The sirens reached the street before I knew anyone had called them. Red and blue light washed through the front windows, bending across the portraits on the wall, my father's face among them, blurred by motion. Outside, someone shouted my name. Then came Eli's voice, sharp and theatrical. "She's crazy. She's losing it again. Through the blinds." I saw him pacing the driveway, his arms flailing in the humid air, our mother crying behind him. I hadn't seen her in weeks. Now she was here, trembling, phone still in her hand. I didn't open the door right away. My heart beat so hard it felt like the house itself was shaking with me. The officer's flashlight flickered over the porch railing. I could already hear the conversation forming the same story, the same disbelief, the same careful tone they used when someone whispered unstable. I unlocked the deadbolt. The hinges sighed as the door swung open. "Evening," the taller officer said. His badge caught the porch light Harris. His expression was cautious but not unkind. "We got a call about a disturbance." Behind him, Eli crossed his arms, watching me like a man waiting for a show to start. "I'm not disturbed," I said quietly, "but you're welcome to come in." The air inside was cooler, scented faintly with cedar and dust. I stepped back so the officers could enter. My mother lingered on the threshold, eyes wet and searching. "She's been acting strange," she whispered to them. "She locks herself in that office for days. I think she's grieving wrong." Her voice thinned on the last words. Grieving wrong. My father's study door was closed at the end of the hallway, the same one I'd turned into my workspace. "Let's start there," Officer Harris said. I nodded and led him down the hall, past the photographs and the smell of old wood polish, the sound of Eli's restless shifting behind us. My hand hovered over the doorknob to my office. "It started this morning," I said. "Right here. My name is Rowena Larkins. I'm 34 years old, and I've spent the last 2 years living in my late father's house on the edge of Charleston. People think I'm quiet because I have nothing to say, but silence is how I keep from breaking things that can't be fixed. Tonight, that silence cracked. The sirens reached the street before I knew anyone had called them. Red and blue light washed through the front windows, bending across the portraits on the wall, my father's face among them, blurred by motion. Outside, someone shouted my name. Then came Eli's voice, sharp and theatrical. "She's crazy. She's losing it again. Through the blinds." I saw him pacing the driveway, his arms flailing in the humid air, our mother crying behind him. I hadn't seen her in weeks. Now she was here, trembling, phone still in her hand. I didn't open the door right away. My heart beat so hard it felt like the house itself was shaking with me. The officer's flashlight flickered over the porch railing. I could already hear the conversation forming the same story, the same disbelief, the same careful tone they used when someone whispered unstable. I unlocked the deadbolt. The hinges sighed as the door swung open. "Evening," the taller officer said. His badge caught the porch light. Harris. His expression was cautious but not unkind. "We got a call about a disturbance." Behind him, Eli crossed his arms, watching me like a man waiting for a show to start. "I'm not disturbed," I said quietly, "but you're welcome to come in." The air inside was cooler, scented faintly with cedar and dust. I stepped back so the officers could enter. My mother lingered on the threshold, eyes wet and searching. "She's been acting strange," she whispered to them. "She locks herself in that office for days. I think she's grieving wrong." Her voice thinned on the last words. Grieving wrong. My father's study door was closed at the end of the hallway, the same one I'd turned into my workspace. "Let's start there," Officer Harris said. I nodded and led him down the hall, past the photographs and the smell of old wood polish, the sound of Eli's restless shifting behind us. My hand hovered over the doorknob to my office. It started this morning. I said, right here. By midday, the house had settled into uneasy stillness. The argument left a residue in the air, something heavy and invisible that clung to the walls. I sat at my desk, pretending to work, though every sound from the hallway made my shoulders tighten. A soft knock came at the door, 2 gentle taps that could only belong to one person. "It's me, sweetheart." Nana Ruth's voice floated through, calm and steady. I unlocked the door. She stood there in her rose-colored cardigan, her silver hair brushed back neatly. At 82, she still carried herself with quiet authority, the kind that made people lower their voices without realizing it. "He's gone now," she said, glancing toward the empty hallway. "Took his temper with him." I tried to smile. "He'll be back. He always is." She stepped closer, eyes sharp but kind. "You can't keep patching over every crack in this family. Kindness without boundaries is surrender." Her words landed like a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying. I turned to my desk. The glow of the computer screen still open on my unfinished project. "Mom thinks I'm cruel," I said quietly. "She says I've changed since Dad died." Nana's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. "Your father used to say peace only lasts if everyone agrees to keep it. Eli never learned that. Your mother's still afraid to." The afternoon light shifted through the blinds, brushing gold across her face. She hummed softly a tune I remembered from when Dad was alive, one he played on the piano after long days. The sound filled the small room, delicate but firm, like a thread sewing something frayed back together. When she left, the air smelled faintly of lavender and dust, and for the first time all day, the silence didn't feel like punishment. The phone rang just after 9. I almost didn't answer, but the screen lit with Mom. Her voice came through tight and trembling. "Rowena, what on earth happened?" Eli called. "He said you locked him out and screamed at him. He's shaking. You can't treat family like that." I kept my tone even. I didn't lock him out. He was shouting. I just kept the door closed. A pause. Then the slow exhale of disbelief. "You've been isolating yourself in that room for weeks. Honey, you're not well. You need help." The line went dead before I could reply. Minutes later, headlights cut across the living room, the sound of a car door slamming, then another. I walked to the top of the stairs and saw Mom and Eli step inside without knocking. Her perfume reached me before her words did. "Rowena," she called, voice sharp with worry. "We're going to talk about this." Eli stood beside her, eyes swollen but dry, his performance rehearsed. "You can't keep doing this to us," he said. Dad wouldn't have wanted it. That sentence hit harder than I expected, using our father like that, turning memory into a weapon. I motioned toward my office. "If you're going to accuse me, at least look at what's true." They followed. I opened my laptop and clicked play on the video. The hallway filled with Eli's own voice, demanding, cursing, pounding. Each word echoed back at him through the speakers. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Eli stared at the screen, his face empty. When the clip ended, the room went still. The hum of the computer was the only sound left. Mom whispered, "This isn't you. You've changed since your father died." I closed the laptop, the click sharp in the quiet. "No, Mom." I finally stopped letting everyone else decide who I am. She turned away, tears streaking down her face, and Eli followed her out. Their footsteps faded down the stairs, leaving the faint scent of gardenia and something broken behind. They didn't stay gone for long. Half an hour later, the sound of the front door slamming jolted me upright. My mother's voice trembled down the hall, her words sharp and uneven. "I can't keep pretending this is normal. She's not well. Ruth, she's not herself." Nana's calm reply floated faintly from the living room. "She's protecting herself." "Marianne, that's all." Then came the phrase that sliced through everything Mom's voice. breaking as she said it. "I'm calling for help." I stepped out of my office just in time to see her with the phone pressed to her ear. Her hands shook. Mascara streaked beneath her eyes. Eli stood behind her, arms folded, his face carefully blank. "Yes," she said into the receiver. "My daughter is having an episode. She's locked herself in. I think she's a danger to herself." Each word landed like a small betrayal. I stood in the doorway, watching her twist the cord around her fingers the way she used to when she was scared. When she hung up, the silence that followed was unbearable. "You didn't have to do that," I said quietly. Her shoulders straightened. "You leave me no choice." Outside, the low hum of sirens began to build slow at first, then louder, closer, until the red and blue lights flickered against the curtains again. Eli moved to the window, pretending surprise. Nana sat on the couch, eyes steady on me. When the officers arrived, I opened the door before they could knock. It was the same man from before Officer Harris. His calm expression didn't change, but I saw recognition flicker there. "Evening again," he said. "We got a call." "I know," I replied. "Please, come in." Mom hovered near the entryway, wringing her hands. Eli avoided my eyes. I led Officer Harris to the office, the others following like ghosts. The lamp still burned over my desk. I pulled up the video, the same one from earlier, and played it. Eli's shouting filled the room once more. Clear and damning. The officer watched in silence, then turned toward my mother. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "your daughter isn't the threat here. False reports like this can carry consequences." Mom's face crumpled. Eli muttered something under his breath, but the officer raised a hand. "Enough," he said. "This ends tonight, when they left." The lights from the cruiser faded into the street. Mom sat on the couch, staring at her trembling hands. Eli retreated upstairs. Nana met my eyes from across the room. "You did everything right," she said softly. But as the quiet returned, the truth settled heavier than before. Winning never felt like this. When the front door closed behind the officer, the house sank into a silence so complete it almost roared. The red and blue reflections still flickered faintly across the window panes before fading into the dark. I stood in the hallway, frozen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the old wood under my bare feet. Upstairs, a door slammed. Eli retreating to his room. Downstairs, Mom sat on the couch, her head in her hands, whispering something I couldn't make out. Nana Ruth stayed by her side, a still presence amid the shaking air. I walked slowly back to my office. The glow of the lamp cast a soft halo across the desk, the same space that had become both refuge and witness. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but the sight of it, of everything that had unfolded within these walls, felt heavier than any deadline. From the living room came Nana's voice, low but firm. "Right doesn't always feel clean. Marianne, sometimes it just feels quiet." I leaned against the doorframe, eyes closed, the words settling deep. The faint clink of teacups followed, the old routine returning out of muscle memory. Mom didn't respond. The house exhaled again, like something weary but still alive. I turned off the lamp and stood for a moment in the dim light, tracing the faint scratches on the floor my father had made years ago when moving his piano. The space where the instrument once stood was empty now, yet the air still held a distant echo, one last note caught between memory and forgiveness. I locked the office door before heading upstairs. Each step creaked softly, familiar and fragile, for the first time. The quiet no longer felt like safety. It simply felt like the end of something. The next morning arrived too bright, sunlight slicing through the blinds and spilling across the hallway like nothing had happened. I moved quietly, the way people do after a storm, careful not to wake what might still be sleeping. Downstairs, I found Mom at the kitchen sink, her back to me. She was still in last night's clothes, her hair pinned loosely, hands motionless over an empty cup. "Coffee's ready," I said. She didn't turn around. "Eli's gone," she murmured. "Packed his things before sunrise." The words landed with a dull weight. I poured a cup and set it on the counter beside her. "That's probably best," I said softly. Her reflection wavered in the kitchen window. "He's still my son, I know," I said. "He's still my brother, too." The silence that followed wasn't sharp anymore, just tired. Nana Ruth came in then, wrapped in her shawl, moving slower than usual. She took one look at us and sighed. "Morning peace only lasts if someone makes it," she said, reaching for the kettle. "Let's not waste it." We sat at the table, the three of us, pretending for a few minutes that things were normal. The sound of spoons against mugs filled the spaces where words refused to go. Outside, the magnolia tree swayed under the weight of the heat, scattering petals across the lawn like small white confessions. After breakfast, Mom disappeared into her room, and the house felt hollow again. I stayed by the window, watching the road. Eli's car was gone, but the dent in the gravel where he used to park remained, a shallow scar in the earth. Later that afternoon, I gathered the files and footage I'd saved the proof, the evidence, and locked them in a small metal box. Then I slid it under the floorboard beside my desk. Some truths didn't need to breathe anymore. When night came, I stood in the doorway of my father's old study, the scent of dust and cedar still strong. The piano was long gone, but I could almost hear him humming, the faint rhythm of his patience woven through the air. I whispered goodnight to that echo before turning off the light. The house didn't fight back this time. It simply let me go. 6 months later, the house no longer belonged to me. I sold it quietly, without a family meeting, without ceremony. The real estate agent called it a charming relic, but to me it had already become a museum of noise shouting, footsteps, the faint echo of my father's piano keys. I packed what mattered into a few boxes and moved to a small apartment overlooking Charleston Harbor. The air smelled of salt and steel. At night, the foghorns sounded like low, steady breathing. Work came easily again. I rebuilt my schedule piece by piece: clients, projects, quiet. In the evenings, I'd sit by the window with my laptop, watching the cargo ships move through the water. They looked calm, heavy with purpose, carrying things far from where they started. One afternoon, a cream-colored envelope slipped through the mail slot. My name was written in my mother's careful, looping script. I turned it over in my hands for a long time before opening it. "We miss you. The house feels empty without your laughter. I know things went too far that night. We see it now. Please come home for dinner just one night." The handwriting trembled slightly, like she'd written it through guilt or hesitation. I folded the letter and placed it on my desk. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume gardenia, fading but familiar. For a while, I just stood there, the harbor wind pushing through the half-open window, rustling the edges of the note. There was no anger left in me, only a quiet ache, the kind that doesn't need an answer. I slid the letter into the top drawer beside my sketches. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water in bands of gold and gray. The ships kept moving, unbothered, steady in their direction. Morning light poured through the wide glass of my apartment window, painting slow lines across the wooden floor. The city outside moved gently, the hum of traffic softened by the water's distance. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, coffee in hand, feeling the air shift with each quiet breath. My desk sat by the window, scattered with open notebooks and the latest project I was finishing for a new client. The hum of my computer felt familiar again, not as an escape, but as rhythm. The world beyond my walls no longer felt like a threat. It simply existed, moving at its own pace. A soft ping sounded from my phone, a message from Nana Ruth. "The garden's blooming early this year. You'd love it here." I smiled, picturing her porch wrapped in sunlight and the wisteria vines curling along the fence. I typed back, "I'll visit soon," and meant it. On the shelf beside me sat the envelope from my mother. I hadn't opened it again, But I no longer avoided it either. It was part of the room now, quiet and still, like something that had finally learned to stay where it belonged. Before leaving for a meeting, I slipped on my shoes and paused at the door. The new digital lock blinked softly green, steady, alive. I pressed my palm to it, feeling its quiet pulse, then turned the handle. When the door clicked shut behind me, it didn't sound like fear anymore. It sounded like peace.